So now the story with your boy, I think that is a very interesting story.
Yes, well, it started when I read a book. I think I've mentioned to some of you guys, the book of Children's Past Lives. I decided to read it because I opened it to a page that was talking about her son having an experience. And my boy, since he was very young, he did not like going to the beach or to pools or like lakes, rivers, all that stuff. He didn't like it. We didn't live that far away from the beach, so to get to the sand, it would take me a long time. And then from the sand to the water, or close to the shore, another like 30 minutes, an hour. Sometimes.
With him, right?
With him.
Trying to convince him to go there?
Yeah, trying to convince him and to tell him that it was okay. We didn't have to go in the water. So he just wouldn't go. It was just rare the times that we would go, you know, because he just didn't like it. And it started with the first experience of him. He was 7 when he... one day out of the blue just told me, Mom, take me to the beach. I want to go. So I was like, okay. I picked him up from school. I had my other guys with me, and I was like, let's go. He rolled up his jeans. He started playing in the water, and I was like, what? But everybody had a great time. The other kids liked the beach, so, you know, they were okay. And then I read that book. Maybe like a year or 2 later, I read the book. He was about 8 or 9. And it just made so much sense as I was reading that, you know, from birth to school age, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, spontaneous past life memory can occur during that time. And then once they reach a certain age and their conscious mind becomes, I guess, like overpowers, or that part goes into a deeper bank in your mind, you know, it could be forgotten or put somewhere deeper. So that's what I thought had happened to him. He reached an age where he was able to just consciously forget about the trauma with the water. So then, one day, I was doing a lot of reading, I guess, with the books and all that, and I felt secure enough to try something with him to see, you know, why it was that he had this fear. So he was on the floor with, like, pillow, like, not even comfortable. My other 2 boys were kind of running around and not really in a quiet environment. But I started doing, like, what made sense to me at that time of an induction and just, you know, with breathing and relaxing. And then, boom, he was there. Like, he was just completely relaxed. My youngest one was probably about, like, 1, or 1 and a half, and, like, was crawling all over him, and he didn't budge at all. He was just there. And then he started telling me, I asked him to go into a life before this one that he'd like to share or talk about. And immediately he started telling me that he was a soldier. He was in a war. And I asked him what type of soldier he was, and he said he was a Roman soldier. He said, my horse is drowning. That's what he said, which I thought was kind of like strange that a horse would drown. But, you know, and I asked him, I said, why is your horse drowning? And he said he's injured and he's drowning and I can't pull him out of the water. And I guess the horse, he made it seem like the horse couldn't swim or use its like legs to try to pull out. So he's trying to pull his horse out and it's not happening and he has to let it go. And the horse like drowns. And I thought that was very sad. Because that's like, you know, your horse is like your
best friend.
Your best friend, and especially in the battle. And then he says so he has to let his horse go, and then he's fighting on shore, and he goes through all the steps, whatever, of stuff happening and arrows, and then he tells me he gets shot in the rib cage right here.
Not shot, but injured.
He said shot. He was 9, so I thought he was going to say like, oh, with a machine gun, or, you know, I thought he was going to go into something that was not like at the right time, but he said no, an arrow had shot him. So he puts his hand here and holds it, and then he's like, I can't breathe, I have a hard time breathing, now I'm in the water, and I can't swim up, and I think I'm going to drown like my horse. So he's trying to swim, and he says that he can't, and he feels that he's going down, and his friends drag him out. They drag him out to shore, and he says that he spent some time on the ground, and then he stands up and is able to continue fighting. And his hand is still here. And then he says that in a short amount of time, he gets shot on the opposite side on his thigh, on his outer thigh. So then he says he collapses. And he says that he's pulled from the shore to behind a bush by some other of his friends. And at this point, I thought that maybe he had died. So I asked him if he can tell me what he feels or if it was the end of that life. He says, no. He's like, I don't see myself dying. That's what he said. I can't see that. He's like, I'm just laying there for a very long time. And then from there, I asked him, so what happens after that? What's next? And he goes into the time before he went to war, the same life, and he starts telling me about he told me his father's name, which was like Augustus. He said Augusto. And his mother's name was Serena. Which I thought was also kind of not words or names that he was familiar with.
Exactly, these are Latin names.
And then he told me he had a brother and then a little sister. And he would play with a sister and then a baby brother. Would play with his sister with like a round thing that they would push, like a wheel, and they would play out in the fields. And that as he got older, he was 22 when he went to war. And he told me that prior to that, he had a mentor that would come to help him train for war. And it was like a father to him. Because real dad was like busy and working and that stuff. So he says that before, so I asked him if there was somebody in that life that was with him now. And he said yes. He said that the mentor was his dad now. And it made so much sense at that moment to me because that's kind of like the relationship that they have. Wow. Like my husband, with him especially, like he always said like his goal is to make him like a strong man and to help him do this and that, like. So I was able to make that connection right away that yes, that makes sense, like a mentor. And then he tells me that his village was like some other people came and then the village was on fire. And the children and the women were trying to run out and a bunch of stuff happened. His family was okay, but then soon after he had to go to war. And he was about 21, 22, and what's very interesting too, it was 30 minutes he was just talking without being interrupted. I was just kept saying, and then what, and then it just all came out. And to me it was interesting as well because usually when he says stories, he would say, and then, like that was his way of talking, right? When he was 9, and this time, like that wasn't happening at all. He was fluent. It was all coming out nice and organized, and so then after, I told him to leave the traumas that he felt from the drowning and the war, and the village burning, that wasn't for him, didn't belong to him anymore, and to leave it in the past. And a few days later, after the regression, I remember that he was born with birthmarks. So I asked him to pull his shirt up, and he has an elongated birthmark like this, right here.
Where he kept
his... After he said he had been shot, once he went to the village, the house, the home, whatever... He stayed like that the whole time.
His hands on
and on his
wounds.
thigh, he has like a round mark. He was born with those, and they're light. They're like a lighter shade.
So it's a lighter shade.
It's a lighter shade.
Interesting.
And I thought that this one was very interesting because it's long.
Yeah.
It's like that. Something like that color.
Oh, so it's a darker shade.
Darker, but a lighter than the lighter shade.
A little darker than the skin, but still light.
Darker than the skin on both sides. He has it right here. And then another interesting thing, too, was that when he would role play, even till now, he says he's 22.
Wow.
He's like, Mom, can I drive? I'm like, no, you can't drive. And he's like, why not? I'm 22.
So he keeps saying he's 22.
And he would say that when he was younger, too, like that age kind of...
I guess he was very connected with that part of that life of being 22, and he was still tapping into that.
Very interesting. When he brought it up, I was like, it makes so much sense.
That's amazing how many particular things.
Yeah, he said a lot of like small details, even with the games that he would play with his sister and, the stuff that like his parents would do. And he went very into like
details. Like interesting.
Yeah. And then after that, what came was that the water became even better. He like wanted to take like swimming classes. And last summer I think I mentioned that he did like the junior lifeguard program, and he's really good at it too. Like at swimming, he's good at swimming. And it just seemed like he flourished after
he saw that life.
And like another aspect, physical aspect, I think that I could kind of put together was that he was having like a slight hearing problem because he would produce too much wax. So the doctors were like, okay, we're gonna give him some Valium. and clear out his ear. And I was like, you're not giving him any value. Like, I'm gonna do the ear, coning
thing.
Yeah.
And that took it all out. And he went to take the hearing test and he passed it. But after that session, I felt like he didn't produce that much wax anymore. Like, it really lowered, like, natural amounts. And I was reading, and I don't even know where I read this at, but something that when a person holds too much fear, they tend to overproduce wax in their ears. I don't even know why I read this or where I read it.
Wow.
But for some reason, they connected to the story of my son.
With
Because I feel like
stress.
maybe he was holding on to some type of fear from that story,
Stress.
producing too much wax. So I don't know, but just little things that make sense to me. He remembers what he told me. He remembers most of what he said. And he's very open and he likes to talk about it, and they all do. Well, the two older ones understand a little more.